Welcome to Inbold, the podcast from Strategy and Middle East. I'm Nai.
And I'm Karim, and we're so excited to bring you this next season on art and culture. Our region has been going through an amazing cultural transformation, and we at Strategy and Middle East have been privileged to be part of it, and we really want to share it with you.
We've got inspiring discussions with great guests who are at the heart of the region's cultural landscape. Yalla, let's get started.
Let's go! Deputy Minister Noha Kattan, welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
You have a very long title, Deputy Minister for National Partnerships and Talent Development in the Ministry of Culture in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Befitting, I think, a mission that is looking to grow an arts and culture ecosystem from not from scratch, given that the country has thousands of years of heritage, of course, but in terms of the government's support for it and enabling the ecosystem, quite a big effort that's been going on for a few years now. And I'd like to start with one obvious question, maybe especially for people from outside this region. The Vision 2030 has clear objectives for arts and culture. The National Culture Strategy has a clear plan, lots of investment behind arts and culture, at a time when in most places around the world, governments are actually pulling back from arts and culture. Why do you think in the kingdom that's such an important focus?
If you think the title is long, you should see the mandate. Something that speaks to the amount of effort and amount of plans that are ahead of us that we started quite a few years ago and still are ongoing with today. So in a country that's undergoing quite a massive transformation, it was extremely important to maintain and protect an identity. In rapid transformations, countries might risk losing their identity across that transformation, and people with globalization and a lot of other elements that are coming at play lose sight or lose their connection with their history, with their roots. And it was of critical importance. We're the first line of defense, the Ministry of Culture, to make sure that that is not the case. So while we're undergoing the transformation, while we're trying to achieve and aspire to deliver on economic diversification, we want to also make sure that we're very true to our identity. We're authentic. We're maintaining that authenticity, and we're maintaining that connection that goes back to our history, our traditions, something we're very proud of, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of it. And it was the anchor, I think, that helped complement what the vision was aspiring to do. So our starting point was very important to pivot on, and that's where culture came as a critical point to build on. And then moving on to the future and looking towards the future became something that we could dream big and go all out about.
One thing that I find interesting in how the Saudi government views culture is that in other parts of the world, the arguments are all about how much is culture costing us, and is it worth that much, and what's it giving us in return. Whereas here, the whole way it's been packaged or emphasized has been, how does this improve the quality of life of my citizens and my visitors and my residents? How does this help me build bridges with other countries and other cultures? Do you feel that emphasis when you're talking to maybe delegations from other countries, or when you're looking at priorities and plans?
So there are two elements to this. So one part is the culture strategy itself, and it has three main dimensions or objectives that we're trying to reach. One of them is culture as a way of life. In our day-to-day lives, how do you interact and get to experience culture in your day-to-day life, whether it's the newspaper you're reading, or the book you're reading, or the film you're watching, or the music you're listening to, or the clothing you're wearing, or the food you're about to enjoy. All of these have cultural means of expression within them, and they have a lot of Saudi elements to them if we're bringing that to surface. Another element of it was how to bring culture to drive economic activity and contribute to the GDP. The third one was about international exchange through cultural means of expression, and how do you build connections and bridges between different countries through nation to nation. And this is a new thing, I think, with the establishment of the Ministry of Culture, because before the Ministry of Culture, government to government was political engagements. It was government representatives talking to government representatives about policies, about international agendas, and so on. But when it comes to culture, it's at a citizen level. It's a nation-to-nation conversation. Again, about the same things of what food are you eating? What ingredients are you using? What kind of clothing are you wearing? And it all ties back to a reason of why we do things a certain way. Why do you wear that clothing? Well, because the weather, because these are the customs we're used to, or the traditions we have. Why do you have this music, or why do you have this dance? You find a wealth of kind of traditional art forms and dances in different regions that are related to mountain areas or close to water bodies and other areas. So it's not. When the country decided to put culture first and put it as one of the dimensions and the focus areas of the vision, they didn't look at it just from the economic aspect, and they didn't look at the returns on their investment just from the economic aspect, but rather, really, what does culture mean from a qualitative perspective, and how does it influence the daily lives of people, be it the citizen, resident, or visitor to Saudi Arabia. And in a country that's just opened up for tourism, what better way to engage with tourists than about your identity? You don't want to just go to another city or country and feel that it's, just the same as any other place. But what you miss and what you recognize in that experience is that unique opportunity to try something that's different from where you come from or other places you've visited. So if you're talking about quality of life, or if you're talking about tourism, or if you're talking about what this means from a memorable experience, culture really comes to play direct to that point.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of my friends who are not from the region, they feel their image of Saudi has really changed since this whole narrative has come into their world, because of course for us here it's been known that we have all these riches and all these stories to tell. But now it's something that comes across, I think, it's much more authentic compared to how other parts of the world market themselves. Let's dig a little bit into the title. It has partnerships on the one hand and talent development on the other. It's also something that you don't see everywhere, this emphasis on partnerships at deputyship level within a ministry. Why do you think partnerships play such an important role in terms of achieving this national culture strategy?
So the National Culture Strategy itself is a sectoral strategy, which means that it's not necessarily going to be delivered by one entity or one body, but it's a national responsibility on everyone. And the idea of partnerships there becomes that you want to create champions out of every other entity that you're working with to kind of carry the baton on your behalf or with you towards that end goal. So the kind of partnerships we look at or be it with the private sector or other government bodies or even non-profit entities, all come to play to that. They play a unique role to deliver on certain areas that we focus on in our strategy that need to be delivered. So the way we look at partnerships is whether we wanted to deliver more talent and a larger talent pool to fill the workforce and the marketplace in the industry for culture across all of our dimensions, be it film or music or performing arts or fashion, for example. Or whether we wanted to deliver more infrastructure or cultural assets, the museums and the art galleries and the theaters and so on and so forth. Whether you wanted to deliver more financing and funding for cultural activity in general. Whether you wanted to deliver more content and trigger more content creation through book publishing or delivery of events or so on and so forth. All of this cannot only be done by the Ministry of Culture, but rather needs those different types of bodies, but other players in the market as well to come and complement what we're doing. So the way we looked at it was that it's not a function to serve necessarily initiatives or plans. It's rather a function to amplify what we're doing and create more champions that can deliver more. So instead of having a 1 + 1 = 2, you have 1 + 1 = 10 with everyone that's been working with you on the same objective.
What I also find sort of refreshing and interesting in terms of how partnerships are being addressed in the culture sector is obviously you mentioned there's the third sector partnerships which are common and we see them a lot ever. But I also noticed that with, for example, the Ministry of Investment, there's been work designed to look at the commercial aspect of the culture sector to attract the private sector as well, which maybe in some other countries we have this, this is culture, has nothing to do with making money or the private sector, and then there's the artistic side. But we seem to have followed, I think, the thinking and that's prevalent across the country in terms of trying to identify opportunities for all types of partners.
I think the private sector plays a key role be it through creative financing ideas or participating in funding directly, or even making commercial profit out of it. At the end of the day, some industries, I don't think there's one size fits all. So there are those, let's say, culture subsectors that are more inclined to be government funded, government supported. And there's still room for the private sector to play there. And there are ones that are highly commercial, even in other countries. So talk about the film industry or the music industry, which are highly profitable, and across the world, you don't see a lot of government necessarily getting involved in this. And even our involvement is to trigger and spark that interest, but then take a backseat and remain as a regulator where the private sector will lead. On the other hand, when you start talking about museums and libraries, which are typically thought of as public funded efforts, even those have a private sector opportunity because of where we are in the sector maturity. So when you start talking about white glove services for handling and shipping and import-export services, for museum loans or for artifacts, when you start talking about infrastructure, actual real estate companies coming and supporting, you could be really creative when you start thinking about those opportunities. And again, we're trying to be all-encompassing and more involving to all the entities that can come and help us deliver on this massive mandate. And so far it's been quite active in terms of their seeking opportunities with the Ministry of Culture, but also very fruitful when we're starting those conversations and finding that acceptance and excitement from them to come and contribute.
Do you find from the fact that we don't have a legacy like in other mature sectors, we don't have a legacy of institutions, or this is the way to do things, or this is how the culture sector is defined, that it actually allows you to be more innovative in how you approach partnerships and how you approach building an ecosystem from a nascent state? Because I remember when I try to explain to people outside Saudi what's going on here, a lot of them just don't get it because they're so stuck in their ways about how things should be.
So I definitely agree with you. I think so. First of all, this was the vision of the Crown Prince when he first gave the mandate to our minister, Prince Badr bin Abdullah, and the idea was ring fence the Ministry of Culture from all legacy systems, all legacy entities that were there, derive or develop a strategy for the next 50 years. So think long term. Don't think just for now or for the next coming couple of years. And that, I think, was quite visionary and very powerful. Very powerful tool in the sense that it really didn't restrict our thinking. And instead of us just becoming very logical and tactical in our approaches, it allowed us to dream. And not only dream in regular size, but dream big. With the combination of creatives coming from the creative industry and a bit of the people working at the ministry that are more on the, let's say, generalist administrative side of things, that combination was the dream team of how you're going to get things done. Dream big, think completely out of the box, nothing keeping you and having you shy away from any idea, no matter how small or big, coupled with people who are actually going to be delivery oriented and deliver on results and make this happen and find a way to make it happen, was really the ultimate tool or power tool that anybody could really have at their disposal. And it allowed us to deliver quite a massive amount of work and a massive amount of development in what would be considered a pretty small or short period of time. So you're talking about the Ministry of Culture established in 2018. We're now 2024. We just celebrated our 6th year anniversary. And if you want to talk about the number of achievements that have been achieved over the past 6 years, you would think that it took us decades to deliver. And today you look at the integration of education, or the integration of culture education to our education systems, and culture subjects in our curricula, or look at the King Salman Complex for Arabic Language, or the Cultural Development Fund, or the Royal Institute for Traditional Arts, or the 11 commissions themselves. You're talking about a massive number of entities that were created either to fund, regulate, contribute to culture one way or the other. When you look at the number of people who are participating today, number of practitioners that were licensed through the licensing platform, or the number of beneficiaries from any of their training programs, they're massive numbers. There's huge appetite and there's great excitement, and the momentum is just continuing. So that, again, that tool that we started with, that premise that nothing too small, nothing too big, nothing less important than the other, and let's do it all with no restrictions and with no criticizing of anything, really stands true today and continues to really help us deliver a lot of what we would never dreamed of just a few years ago.
I like some of the examples you're giving, and it makes me think when I walk through MOC, the people who work there are reflective of how young the population is, but you can also see the excitement, you can also see the pride, because this is not we call it an industry sometimes, but actually it's about creativity, it's about people, it's about impacting, people learning ballet, people becoming musicians. So very interesting. Talent development is the other part of the mandate, and not a simple task as well, because I think we often use the expression building the plane while flying it, given how quickly we want to progress and how big the ambitions are. How do you balance the fact that we need expertise on the ground today, because there are many, many things happening and are about to happen, many projects, many institutions, many programs being activated, and at the same time we need to make sure that we worry about education from K-12 all through lifelong and through vocational and higher learning in parallel.
So the starting point of culture and the sector itself is a very different one from perhaps other countries, because people are surprised when they find out that up until today we don't physically have music education in our K-12 education, for example. And at the same time, we're trying to build this massive industry and take it light years ahead that require real expertise and quite professional level expertise. And the way we were doing it, given that we're pressed for time to deliver a lot of things yesterday, but also we want to make sure that we build the right talent pool for the future and for the long term, and really set it up from the get-go on an anchored state that's quite robust. And the beauty of the culture sector as well is, let's say, twofold. People who are talented regardless of education. And you have this raw talent that you then want to mold and build more of and take to the next level. And those exist, and those existed even when maybe the ecosystem didn't support it. So you still have the examples of Muhammad Abdu or Safiya bin Zagir as artists that even in an era where those systems or ecosystem didn't necessarily support them, they still thrived. They still influenced not only the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but the region. And then you have your efforts that you're really building from the ground up, from KG all the way to the workforce or entrepreneurship, or even the highly talented and high caliber expertise, or distinguished expertise, let's say. And so the Ministry of Culture was conscious of this important element, and we created a dedicated talent development strategy for the culture sector that took into account both formal and informal levels of education, took the journey of any individual from kindergarten all the way to the labor market or to the workforce, and thought of every touch point that we need to be involving ourselves in to make sure that we're not missing any opportunity to really get people excited about culture, involved and exposed to culture, and engaged in culture, whether on a professional level or a hobbyist level or an amateur level or an extremely professional level. And we go all the way into people opening up businesses in the sector. That's the long-term plan, and it's going to take time, and we're taking it step by step, and we're really putting a lot of emphasis on getting it right and to the level of quality that we aspire to. In parallel, all the talent that already existed and are in the market today as we know it, even if in small quantities, are still being engaged and are actually cornerstones to a lot of the efforts we're working on. And that's also coupled with international expertise, where we need certain expertise that we lack at the moment or we don't have enough of just yet. The beauty of culture is that it's also enriched with cultural exchange. So we're not necessarily just thinking about the local expertise, but also coupled and complemented and built through the international expertise, and hopefully taking those opportunities to build where people have ended, or start where people have ended, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. And we're moving in both speeds at any given point of time. So it's not your conventional way of doing things necessarily, but it's definitely been proving effective so far.
For some of our listeners or viewers, the fact that you're a woman and a deputy minister might still come as a surprise. Although for everyone who is in the country or knows what the amount of change that is taking place, this is no longer something special. How do you feel about this perception, perhaps, of the country?
The size of the women workforce that I have in my own department is actually, it actually exceeds the number of men in my department. And I get the comment usually where, now we need men empowerment programs to complement what the women were doing, or at least to make up for that. So I understand perhaps that it's not easy to believe because it was such a rapid change, but like everything else in Saudi Arabia, it was planned, or it was said, and it was delivered in exponential time, and today we're living it, and definitely not something that we're still contemplating or thinking about.
So, as you mentioned, we're still in the beginning of a journey that has been planned for decades ahead, yet at the same time a lot of things have been achieved. What is the thing that you're most proud of in terms of how this arts and culture ecosystem or sector has been changed so far?
So we're proud of a lot. I'm proud on a personal level when I see the amount of things that materialize that you're able to deliver successfully with all the support and all the enablement that we've been given. And there are many examples today that are live examples of things that are successfully on the ground and people are really not only benefiting from but hopefully enjoying. When you talk about the engagement of a population and our youth with all of our identity, and people picking up on something like the Year of Saudi Coffee or Flag Day or Founding Day, and the amount of engagement that is or amount of pride that is associated with anything that is culture and goes back to the roots, it's really inspiring. The fact that people are aware of all of these cultural expressions and all of this rich heritage and culture and art that we have is something that we're extremely proud of. The team members, the people that started as people who were just dreaming about this and now are people that have created actual jobs and livelihood and income from it and made this as a career and chose to pursue this on a serious level, not just as a thing on the side or as a hobby. These are all things that someone must be very cognizant of and realize, and very proud to see materialize, but proud to see excitement about. I think the pride in most element is just looking at the amount that has been done in such a short period of time, and the fact that when we first started, not everyone was convinced that we could deliver it or could get there. And today, I think by all means of the word, not only have we gotten there, but we've exceeded our own expectations. And you'd think that would be it, but the bar keeps getting raised higher and higher, and every time we accomplish one challenge or tackle it, there's the next challenge and the next challenge. And if anything, that just triggers more drive and more excitement and more passion towards the sector and towards what we're doing and what we're working on, and what we're blessed to have the opportunity to work on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Deputy Minister Noha Kattan. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I wish you a lot more success in this culture transformation journey.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been lovely speaking to you.
I hope you found that conversation as insightful and interesting as I did. And if you did, please share it with your friends, colleagues, or anyone in your network that you think would also be interested in learning more about arts and culture in Saudi Arabia.